Hello. I have shit to talk today. I want to start off by saying, typically this is viewed as controversial. I don't find it to be something that's controversial. I think that people like to stay in a cycle because it's comfortable. And I think that society has created this cycle, or at least perpetuated this cycle in ways that makes it more difficult for people to understand all the things that are actually wrong with it. And when I do post things in the same category of what I'm about to say, I typically receive a lot of backlash. The last time I posted was on the TikTok app about this specifically, and I really didn't get that much backlash. I had a lot of people agreeing with me, but it didn't do numbers, and there's a reason for that. It's because, like I said in the video on TikTok, people like to stay in these cycles because it's comfortable. They like to feel like their behavior is absolved. They like to know that there are other people that do this too, so they don't feel as bad for doing it. And today, what I'm gonna talk about is autonomy in relationships. And your partner doesn't have the right to dictate what is done with your own body and your own choices. I don't think it's possible to say that I can put everyone in one category and generalize them to a certain situation, right? Because that's just unrealistic. I see a lot of issues rooted within a relationship when I see someone saying, oh, I have a masked girlfriend, so she's not allowed to talk to other femmes. She's not allowed to be friends with other femmes. Even in a hetero relationship, my boyfriend isn't allowed to interact with other women. My girlfriend isn't allowed to interact with other men. What do you mean allowed? What do you mean allowed? And this can look like so many different things. Like, a person does not have to blatantly say, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, because there are so many different ways to manipulate someone into doing what you want them to do and calling it a boundary, for example. My most recent video was pretty basically about this. I just scratched the surface of saying that it is our responsibility to handle the things that have hurt us in the past. Meaning, it's not our fault the things that happen to us, but it does become our problem, and that's true for everything. It's not just romantic relationships. But let me give you a small example. My last relationship, I was lied to an absolute ton. And I will tell you honestly, I wanted to keep the relationship so badly that I was like, I'm sure that I can find a way to look past this. And then as things unraveled, I saw more and more lies unraveling and more truths that were hidden. And I just felt like, what am I gonna do? Like, what am I gonna do? I don't trust anything that you say. So now at that point, using myself as an example, I had to sit with myself and say, am I really ready to get over this? And the point of this video isn't the decision that I chose to make, but rather that it is my responsibility to decide whether or not I was up for that. You don't get to take someone's autonomy away all because they lied to you. We're adults. And I personally see that as high school shit and just toxic relationship shit overall. I don't want someone who I have to wonder with their every move or watch their every move. I don't want to feel anxious. I don't want to feel like I can't trust my partner. I don't want to be with a partner who I can't set free into a room full of women that look exactly like me without worry. Like, I just want a relationship that is so solid and so secure that all I have to do really is exist and love them properly in order to keep them. I don't want to have to change their behavior or watch who they speak to in order to keep them. I don't want to have to tell them what to do in order to keep them. And I think that my biggest thing with this topic is like, why are you okay with that? Like, if your argument is that, you know, this is normal and that you should be able to tell them who they can text, who they can talk to, where they're allowed to go, who they're allowed to see, why would you want to be with someone who makes you feel that way? Don't you feel like you deserve more than having to worry and question? And if it's not something that this specific partner did that made you feel that way, if it's something from your past, why don't you want to heal that and be a better version of yourself and a better partner? Because at the end of the day, no matter what is said on this topic, you do not have the right to take somebody's autonomy away. And you don't have to agree with that, but that doesn't take away its value. And I think that's something that is far too often overlooked on this topic, is that, like, you deserve better than to have to worry. Whether it's your partner who gave you these trust issues, or a partner from your past, or even rooted in your childhood, maybe your parents gave you these trust issues, and maybe that's where you adopted them from. Don't you feel like you deserve better than to feel that way? Let's just take out the partner for a second, even though I think that that's really the part for me that makes me like, let's just remove that from the equation for a second, and let's talk about you, or the person who is exhibiting these kinds of behaviors where it's like, you know, oh, I don't want you to talk to this person, or you're not allowed to talk to that person. Don't you think that you deserve to live a freer and more peaceful life than to have to worry all the time about who your partner is talking to, or if they're gonna do something unsavory? Now again, I do think that things that happen to us are not our fault. I'm a firm believer in that. I do think we have a choice though, what we do with those experiences. Are we gonna adapt our behavior to the experiences? Because if we're adapting to experiences that happened in our past and we're bringing them into our future, we're just carrying all of this fucking unnecessary weight on our shoulders into every relationship, and it's affecting us still to this day, which means we are still living in that trauma if we don't heal our projections. And I just don't feel like that's a life that's worth living. We have the opportunity to change those things, so why wouldn't you want to? And here's a secret. I've actually been in this situation quite a few times. Now granted, I came out at 23. We all know things are very different with men, but what I will say is whether you're queer or hetero, this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable for someone to do that to you, and it's unacceptable for you to try and dictate what somebody else does as well. I think another big thing about all of this for me is that we should be looking a little bit harder for people who align with us and not just trying to mold the people that we're with into the type of person that we want. We're so committed as a society to stay in things that make us uncomfortable or stay in relationships that clearly aren't cutting it just because we're expected to fight for our relationship. There's a difference between fighting for the relationship and fighting the relationship or fighting your partner. And I think it's something that's just overlooked way too often on top of so many other things about this topic. Telling your partner what to do is not healthy behavior. And on top of that, it's such an easy way to build resentment in the relationship. I feel like it dooms the relationship to an inevitable ending. And I have done this as recently as within the last couple years because there was someone that I wanted to keep so bad, I lost sight of what my actual goal in a relationship was. And what I want to really align with in the category of relationships in my life would never include me being afraid or telling someone what they have to do in order for them to be a good fit for me. And the reason I'm so confidently stating that I'm single is because I don't see it as a bad thing. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm not afraid of being single. I would much rather be alone with myself, living a fulfilled life, than working towards a relationship with someone who just isn't cutting it for me. And at some point along the line of me trying so hard to prevent any cheating or lying from happening by mitigating another person's behavior, I was burying myself, okay? I was burying myself. But somewhere along that line, I was like, why am I doing this again? Why would I want to work towards a relationship again where I have to do this? Am I even working towards the relationship or am I working against it? Because at the end of the day, I get to choose and this doesn't fit me. And I think that if for you, that's your standard in a relationship, you can find someone who aligns with that without having to tell them that they need to align with that. If you want a partner that's so obsessed with you that they literally don't talk to anyone else of the same or opposite gender, depending on what your sexuality is, you can find that. And I think that this again is something that goes so unnoticed in relationships. Resentment is going to build when you take on the role of being somebody's parent. And when you're telling your partner what they are and aren't allowed to do, you are becoming their parent. That was a little harsh, or maybe it wasn't harsh enough. It's important for you to identify what your needs are in a relationship. And if that is a need for you, and maybe the need is communicated and it isn't playing out the way you want it to, that doesn't mean that you have the right to dictate what this person does with the threat of them losing you or with the threat of things getting worse in your relationship. At some point, we have to really identify what the issue is. And sometimes it's an issue of, oh, this person's not really understanding what I mean. And other times, most times, it's an issue of, you don't align with me. And trust me when I tell you, oh my God, I felt like I was with the actual love of my life. And still to this day, I love her and I will love her forever. However, we do not align. We are different people. And was that hard to accept? Absolutely. But it's better for us both because she's going to find someone who aligns with her and who she feels at peace with and safe with, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of those things. And I'm going to find the same. And while it's so hard to let go of something that you feel was maybe perfect at one point, it's important to accept that you don't want to cause your partner or yourself more damage than you need to. And telling someone what to do is not going to maintain a relationship. Dictating someone's actions and what they're quote unquote allowed, that's insane to me, to do is not going to make for a healthy relationship. And I think that another huge thing about this for me is like, I'm not gonna let this go. I don't want to have to tell you what to do to be a good partner in my eyes. I don't want to have to tell someone what to do and fit them to my standard in order for them to fit my standard. Like, I want my standards to just be fit I want my needs to just be met. I know that relationships come with compromise, and I know that some things are just a discussion. And I do think that it's important that your partner respects what makes you uncomfortable. But there's a difference between something making you uncomfortable and there being a mutual understanding and you telling someone what to do or someone telling you what to do. And I'll tell you what, if you feel like something's funky, right, and you're like, you being around that girl kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and they're like, what's your problem? One of two things is happening. Either A, you really need to recognize your projections, or B, something is weird. And that's not aligning with your vibe. That's not aligning with what you want out of a relationship. And I think that that's what makes this situation such a talking point for me, is like, there are not many ways out of this. There aren't many ways around telling your partner what to do and what the reasons for that might potentially be. And every time I have begged someone to be the bare minimum for me, or I have begged them to respect a boundary of mine, so to speak, one, it's never involved their autonomy, because that's not appropriate, that's not a boundary, that's a rule. And two, begging someone to respect a boundary or hear you out? No. Like, we need to accept that that's not acceptable behavior. We need to understand that that's not behavior that you want to see in a relationship. That is what a red flag is. And that's why I say there are only so many directions that this could go, and I don't feel like generalizing is the right way to do it, but I can't find another way around how telling someone that they can't see people or can't text people or can't put themselves around certain people or whatever it might be, I can't find a way around that to make that behavior acceptable. Because if you have to do that, don't you see the issue? You always are deserving of everything that you want, but you can't make anyone who you want them to be. And you should re-examine your relationship and see if it's something that it's worth keeping or not, because you don't deserve to freaking stress all day, dude. People say relationships are hard and they require a lot of effort. Listen, I think that adapting to a whole other human being integrated into your life who comes from a different background with different parents and different life experiences, yes, that comes with compromise. That comes with a lot of adaptations. At the end of the tunnel that you're walking down, you're holding hands together, and it's a union at the end of that tunnel. It shouldn't be you guys facing each other with all of this doubt and this fear and this worry that if you turn your head away for long enough, they might hold someone else's hand down that tunnel. But what I'll say is, it's never okay to think that you have control over your partner's autonomy, what they do with their body, who they see, who they text, who they talk to. And if you find yourself in a situation where you say, okay, I know that I've reflected and this isn't an issue with past relationships, it's an issue in this one, you need to examine whether or not this relationship is actually for you. And you need to be ready to acknowledge that you might actually deserve better than what you're getting from this relationship. That doesn't mean that the person you're with is a bad person. It just means that maybe you guys don't align. And I think that that's always worth examining. The main takeaway from this video is, even if you are projecting a little bit, it doesn't mean that you're not deserving of a better and healthier relationship dynamic. It's just a matter of whether or not you can find that within the relationship you're in. Because if you took away your control, if you take away the fact that you're saying you can't talk to this person, if you took all of those rules away, would it still be a healthy relationship? Would you be comfortable with them talking to people? Would you trust them? That's a question that needs to be asked, and I think that it's often the question that we're afraid to ask ourselves, which is why we put these rules and bounds on a relationship. Not boundaries, rules and bounds. I think that when we fear what's on the other side of that, that's when we start to make rules for our partner. And you have to ask yourself if that's something that you actually want, because I don't know anyone who would actually want that. We need to start identifying with the love for the relationship and the needs that it meets for us, rather than obsession with the person and wanting to keep them, because there's a huge difference between loving a person and wanting to keep a person. Anyway, like and subscribe if you like this video. If you hate it, also like and subscribe, because I spent time on this. Okay, love you.